Spider-Man on the PlayStation 1. Yeah, just ignore my crappy game box and cover. I lost a real one years ago, but the disc is still legit, and this game has been with me now for more than 17 years. Overall, when it comes to Spider-Man, I've been a fan since the late 90s when they started showing Spider-Man the Animated Series on TV, which easily became my most favorite show to watch. It had good stories, well-designed and memorable characters, superpowers, great action scenes, and that kick-ass theme song that I could never get out of my head. The only thing missing was a good Spider-Man game. Unfortunately, the first Spider-Man game I played was Return of the Sinister Six on the Famiclone, and I just pissed all over that one. It had crappy controls, crappy hit detection, the game was just terrible even back then. So I never finished it, and for the next couple of years, I forgot about ever playing a good Spider-Man game. Until the year 2000. September 15, 2000 marks the date when Spider-Man was released for the PlayStation in Europe. It was published by Activision and developed by Neversoft. For me, Neversoft will always be most famous for developing Tony Hawk's Pro Skater games. Back in the days in my neighborhood, I don't remember a single kid who didn't like to play Tony Hawk. Everybody was hooked on those games for a long time, and Spider-Man runs on the same game engine as Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. After its release, Spider-Man received critical acclaim. If by any chance it wasn't the best superhero game back then, it was definitely the best Spider-Man game. Experiencing the first level from a PlayStation demo disc at my friend's place, I was blown away instantly. It was the first Spider-Man game that was played from a third-person perspective. I could climb tall buildings, web swing from one building to the next, my attacks actually had proper effect on the enemies, and the music was awesome. When I got this game for Christmas in 2000, I nearly shit my pants from excitement. As a kid, I played this game so many times that eventually I almost remembered the entire dialogue script by heart. You know that moment when you're listening to a song and you sing along with the lyrics? Well, I spoke along with the dialogue. Yeah, it's ridiculous, but it happened. Now, since I mostly played this game from the late 2000 up until the mid 2001, what I want to do for this review is explain the viewpoint of my younger self when I was 8 to 9 years old, and what I thought about the game back then, and at the same time explain my viewpoint as an adult. What I think about the game now, in 2018. So with that said, let's take a look at Spider-Man. The story begins at a science expo where a supposedly reformed Dr. Otto Octavius is demonstrating his new invention. We see Peter Parker in the crowd and Eddie Brock taking shots for the Daily Bugle.
Just keep shooting, Eddie.
Everything seems to be going well until the expo gets attacked by an imposter Spider-Man who steals Doc Ock's machine. During the theft, Eddie tries to get pictures of the situation, but the imposter Spider-Man breaks Brock's camera. This gets Eddie frustrated, angry, and he loses control of the symbiote inside him, and Venom takes over, promising revenge on Spider-Man and Jameson, who runs the Daily Bugle.
Jameson and the insect are gonna pay.
Meanwhile, we see two mysterious black figures deploying a strange fog that spreads across the city. So if you noticed, there's no backstory in this game during the campaign, which is most likely confusing for someone who doesn't know anything about Spider-Man's universe. I mean, in the first cutscenes, we have an imposter Spider-Man, Eddie Brock, Peter Parker, Venom, Jameson, Doc Ock, and two black figures. That's a lot of characters, so the game kind of expects for you to know your Spider-Man shit. But now let's talk about the scene with the two black figures. As an 8-year-old, I figured out these characters in about 2 seconds, and there's a good chance that anybody who knew anything about Spider-Man did the same.
Sad thing is, he'll probably get his own talk show for this.
In the first cutscene, the game is telling us that Doc Ock is a good guy now, but the next scene shows a black figure with metallic arms. And for anyone who knows Doc Ock, the metallic arms are an instant giveaway. Secondly, we just heard Octavius speak on the stage, and they made him speak in this cutscene as well. Why? Anyone can recognize the fucking voice they just heard 2 minutes ago, you dumbasses.
I, Dr. Otto Octavius, vow, as a scientist and businessman, phase 1 completed. Let us begin phase 2.
And the second black figure? Well, of course it's Carnage. First of all, Venom and Carnage are both symbiotes and their body shapes are quite similar. While Venom is black, Carnage is red, and you can actually see the red color if you look closely, not to mention the fact that Carnage is a psychopath and they made him laugh in this scene. Now, as a kid, it didn't bother me at all that I figured out who this secret main villain was before even actually playing the game. But looking at this now, I think this is some serious garbage storytelling even for 2000 standards. Trying to make us believe that a villain has turned to the good side only to fuck up that plot detail already in the next cutscene with such obvious giveaways is absolutely ridiculous. Yes, it would have been a cliche in the end, but at least the story would have had a little bit of more mystery. Maybe it was intentional, who knows, but if it was, then screw you guys. Let's move on.
No thanks, Mr. Death Wish.
So the real Spider-Man goes out looking for answers, but the Black Cat shows up and tells him that the bank is being robbed, which puts Spider-Man's search for truth on hold. He swings and climbs across the rooftops, takes out a few thugs, witnesses how the robbers shoot down a couple of police choppers, and then he asks one of the dumbest questions in the game.
Is that the bank ahead?
Is that the bank? No, it's the Uncle Ben's factory.
Now that's scary.
Anyway, after getting inside the bank, saving the hostages and stopping the robbery, Peter gets a call from Jameson, who tells him to shut up and call the police because Scorpion is about to attack him.
Scorpion's here, and you have to...
Now, as a kid, me and my friends made a lot of jokes about this scene after a couple of playthroughs when we started noticing these weird, nonsensical story details.
Yeah, whatever.
So let me get this straight. Jameson calls one of his employees and tells him to call the police instead of just calling the police himself. And remember, in the beginning of the cutscene, we can clearly hear that Peter's phone is ringing, which means that Jameson is actually calling him. That makes no sense. But it gets even better.
Curse your endless battle!
When the level begins, you have this meter on top of the screen. If Scorpion makes it to Jameson before you get to the Daily Bugle, then you lose. But the beginning cutscene completely shits all over the purpose of this meter, because we saw that Scorpion is already in the office with Jameson, so what the hell's he doing all this time? The entire Scorpion section is just so fucking stupid in this game, and we thought this was ridiculous even back in 2001.
Spare me the propaganda, okay?
So of course, Spider-Man makes it on time, defeats Scorpion and saves Jameson. After the fight, you can see that there's a TV on the ground that's playing footage from Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. A friend of mine used to make a joke that Jameson and Scorpion were definitely playing Tony Hawk this whole time until Jameson won and Scorpion got pissed off.
Get over it, Gargan!
Yeah, it was a stupid joke, but we laughed. Anyway, the police officers show up right after all the action as usual, and Jameson actually tells them to shoot Spider-Man for stealing Doc Ock's machine. What an asshole.
Shoot him now!
Spider-Man escapes and gets stopped by Daredevil.
Hold it, Spider-Man.
After explaining his situation, Daredevil knows that Spider-Man is telling the truth and runs off to spread the word, but the police are right on Spidey's tail.
Uh-oh.
Now, what follows is one of the most over-the-top and awesome police chases I've ever seen in a video game. As a kid, the entire police chase section was my favorite, and you know what? It still is. Yeah, when you think about the concept, it doesn't make a lot of sense, like how the chopper pilot is causing God knows how much property damage, blasting missiles left and right against public buildings, and what kind of a police chopper has missile launchers anyway. But it doesn't matter, because this is one of the best sections in the game. It's ludicrous, yes, but fast-paced, intense, and a lot of fun.
Get serious, will you?
So after Spider-Man loses the police, we come to another weird cutscene moment.
Uh-oh. Spider sense tingling. One more step and it's a load of web fluid sticking you to that wall.
Well, it's not the most romantic proposition I've ever had.
Black Cat. Oh, I'm so glad it's you.
Okay, what? When he turns around, he can obviously see the Black Cat standing there, yet he still finishes that threat? It's like his brain has been slowed down or something. In a way, this reminds me of the rooftop scene from the best worst movie ever made, The Room.
I did not hit her. It's not true. It's bullshit. I did not hit her. I did not. Oh, hi, Mark.
Because when you think about it logically, as soon as Johnny steps on the roof or when Spider-Man turns around, of course they can see the other character, yet they keep talking and still act surprised after all that time. Is it just me or does it seem kinda strange?
Are you out of your mind? Don't answer that.
Well, anyway, Black Cat comes with bad news. Omnitek is being attacked by Rhino and Venom has kidnapped Mary Jane. But before Spider-Man can go to the rescue, they need to stop Rhino. Also, in my opinion, we get one of the best Spider-Man speeches ever written and performed in this cutscene.
Being Spider-Man has given me a lot and taken a lot away, but one thing never changes. My responsibility to use my powers for others before myself, no matter what the cost.
Spider-Man and Black Cat arrive at Omnitek to find out that another piece of tech is being stolen and Rhino seems to be missing. But then...
That leaves one question. Where's Rhino?
Oh, come on. How can you not hear that big lump of fuck running towards you? As a kid, I literally facepalmed on this.
Fair enough.
Now, moving on. Spider-Man defeats Rhino, and as usual, the police officers show up right after all the action. We see Doc Ock working with the police, helping them capture Rhino, but back in 2000, probably all Spider-Man fans playing this game knew that this is just an act. Since there's too many officers around, Spider-Man ditches the costume and goes looking for Black Cat as a civilian, and sees a couple of paramedics taking her away. The game kinda makes Peter look like a dumbass in this scene.
Hey, wait! Cat! Cat, it's Peter!
Peter! Gotta help me. They're not really paramedics.
How did he not hear that? And besides, look at these paramedics. It's the same thugs you fought in the first level.
Where, what a wuss.
The next section in the story begins with Spider-Man having a conversation with the Human Torch on top of the Statue of Liberty. MJ is still missing because of Venom, and after a little encouragement from Johnny, Spidey sets out to find her. But Venom comes up behind and challenges Spider-Man to a race.
Hey, want a race?
The level itself is not actually a race, you just have to keep up with Venom. My favorite part is definitely the building section. I always wondered what it might look like from the inside.
Get out of my way, nerd!
Oh, toe, ow!
Hey, look out, lady!
Oh my goodness!
Oh, sorry, lady. Didn't see a thing.
Now, once you make it to the last rooftop, it's time to fight. It's funny how Venom's tongue shape is also left in the billboard. I mean, what the hell's that thing made of?
Cat!
When the fight's over, Venom escapes down to the sewers, and holy shit, would you look at the size of this place? What kind of a sewer entrance is this?
I'll never tell you!
So Spider-Man chases Venom all around the sewers, fighting the Lizardmen, riding on a subway train, which is my most hated level in this game, but we'll talk about that later, and solving puzzles. In the final puzzle section, Venom is playing hot and cold. He even wrote messages on the walls.
Starting to sweat here, Parker?
So you have to pay attention to what Venom says. You can also find the imprisoned lizard who explains that Venom is responsible for capturing him and he's the one controlling the Lizardmen. He also gives you directions on how to get around this maze, but personally I found it a lot more easier to just play Venom's game.
Go back along this tunnel and cross over 2 waterways. At the 3rd waterway, go right, follow it around the corners, past the machinery, skip the first tunnel intersection, then go right at the next one.
Yeah, you lost me. Spidey makes it to Venom's lair and has to fight him while keeping MJ safe from drowning. Once Venom has been beaten, Spider-Man explains that he's been framed. They team up and go looking for the real mastermind behind this setup. Now, when it comes to the character of Venom, then in this game he's kind of the comedy relief, especially after the sewer segment. As a kid, I'll admit it, I thought he was funny and I pretty much laughed at every one of his jokes. But now, I think turning a badass like Venom into a comedy relief is kind of an insult to the character, and I believe it should never be done again. But that's just my opinion.
Bummer. You're in the doghouse now, dude.
Anyway, Spider-Man and Venom break into the Daily Bugle to... Wait, why are they doing this again?
I need Jameson's help on this. We're going to the Bugle. We're going to use his computer database.
Okay, so they need to use Jameson's computer database to... do what exactly?
Surf the web, surf the web.
I swear, I've been watching these 2 cutscenes like 10 times now, and I still don't get it. I know that they have to find out who the imposter Spider-Man was and who could have been interested in Doc Ock's machine, but how's the computer database gonna help with that? It's never explained that well, or maybe it's just me who doesn't get this.
You bonehead.
In the Bugle, Venom senses the presence of Carnage and runs off to stop him, and Spider-Man finds out that the Daily Bugle has been infested with symbiotes.
God, symbiotes.
Spidey makes his way down to the deeper levels while fighting the symbiotes and saving the people who've been trapped. We see that the symbiotes are being made from these symbiote generators. Now, from all the Spider-Man stuff that I've watched, read, or played, this is the only time I've ever seen a symbiote generator. How does it work? I have no idea. For all I know, these are Carnage's cloned ballsacks doing this.
What?
Spider-Man destroys the generators and goes down to the basement, where we finally get to see who the imposter is. When I was playing this the first time, I made a guess that it was gonna be either Mysterio or the Chameleon, simply because in the animated series both of these characters framed Spider-Man in certain episodes, and I basically guessed right. It's Mysterio. So unfortunately for me, the sense of mystery in this storyline was never strong.
Oh, you're just too clever for me.
After Spider-Man defeats Mysterio, he reveals that the fog over the city is preparing everyone for the symbiote invasion. He refuses to say who this secret mastermind behind this plan is, but he does give Spider-Man a location. Warehouse 65 on the waterfront.
We thought of that.
At the warehouse, Spider-Man finds the Punisher, who thinks it would be best to team up, but the Webhead decides to go in alone. He destroys more generators and finds a passageway that takes him to a secret underwater base. Because what's an evil master plan without a secret base? Spider-Man finds the source of the fog and the imprisoned Black Cat. He begins jamming the exhaust ports, which causes a power malfunction that frees the Black Cat, and the base slowly starts to fall apart.
Yeah, just my luck. I'll probably get blamed for that too.
At the end of the base, we finally get to see the mastermind behind this.
The symbiote Spider-Man.
Doc Ock?
No fucking way. This must be the twist of the century.
I should have known a reformed Doc Ock was too good to be true.
Then somehow Venom shows up. How? I don't know, but he begins fighting Carnage while Spider-Man takes on Doc Ock. Spidey beats Octavius, but Venom loses the fight with Carnage, so with the help of a sonic device that Doc Ock built in case Carnage double-crosses him, Spider-Man takes him down as well, and the symbiote separates from Cletus. Now, just look how Spidey stands tall like a fucking idiot letting the symbiote crawl away like that. I mean, did he forget that the symbiote is a living thing that bonds with other people and he just left a supervillain downstairs? As a kid watching this the first time, I couldn't believe that Spider-Man was this stupid. So of course, the symbiote bonds with Doc Ock, creating Monster Ock. As the base collapses, Spider-Man escapes from Monster Ock in a long chase and nearly makes it while Octavius gets engulfed by the fire. Because of the symbiote, Doc survives. It separates and crawls away again, with Spider-Man apparently not giving a fuck, which for me is kind of weird considering that Spidey just saw firsthand what this thing is capable of doing to someone. Well, whatever, I suppose. He carries the unconscious Doc Ock out of the exhaust port and gets picked up by Captain America. But wait a minute. What about Cletus Cassidy? Did someone forget about him? Did he die? Did the symbiote go back for him?
Ooh, we know!
Yeah, your guess is as good as mine. The story ends with Spider-Man playing cards with the Daredevil, Captain America, and the Punisher while the Human Torch and the Black Cat are dancing. At the same time, Rhino, Scorpion, Mysterio, and a member from the Jade Syndicate are doing the same in prison. We get to see Mysterio's strange sex fantasy, and the game closes with a frustrated Doc Ock headbanging on the prison door. So that about wraps up the story, and, well, let's be honest, it's ridiculous. Not just from nowadays perspective, but from 2000s as well. I can't count how many times me and my friends made fun of this story when we were little brats. There's a lot of unexplained details, plot holes, moments and character behavior that make no sense. At times, the plot is like a little child tripping over his own shoelaces. If you know too much about Spider-Man villains, then it's too predictable. And if you don't know anything, then you're gonna be confused because there's pretty much no backstory. So either way, you're kinda fucked. We do have the character viewer in the menu where you can check up some additional information about the characters, but it's not that detailed in my opinion. But now, I gotta be fair. I still love this plot. Yes, it's stupid on so many levels, but it's got a certain charm to it. It's so cool that we get cameos from other superheroes in this game. It's so cool that some of the intros in certain levels are narrated by Stan Lee. As a kid, I didn't care about that, but now I appreciate this so much more.
So get ready for a true superhero action thriller.
The villain selection is almost excellent. I would have loved to see one of the goblins as well, but it's okay. At least the villains we got are still good and pretty well acted for the most part, and after all the crap and more than 15 years, it was still fun to watch how the story unfolds. On paper, the plot is good. It's just the execution that needed a bit of refinement from my point of view. And with that said, let's check out the gameplay.
Is it too late for us to be friends?
For its time, the game did a pretty good job of utilizing Spider-Man's powers and even adding some new features. As anyone would expect, you can jump high, crawl on walls, web swing, and kick lots of ass. traversal mechanics work well for the most part. I only have a bigger bone to pick with the web swinging. For some reason, Spidey can swing only 2 times max, and then he, I don't know, gets exhausted or something. You can keep the swing going if you let go of the web during the second swing, or the first, then change direction and hit the swing button again. But it's not ideal because every time you do that, Spidey moves down a bit and eventually you will fall.
I need to use my Spidey compass to find the bank.
Also, it's a bit difficult to explain, but it seems like Spidey gravitates towards the nearest walls or the ground while swinging, and this can get annoying in certain levels where you need to move quickly. For example, the final chase. It looks like if the wall up front is too far, then he automatically moves towards the wall on the side, or the ground. Well, that's the impression that I got. And by the way, this is one of those Spidey games where it seems like the web is getting attached to the sky when you're maneuvering outdoors. But you still need buildings to swing. If you jump off from a roof and there's no buildings within sight, then Spidey will fall down. I always thought it was kind of funny how Spider-Man doesn't even try to save himself, even when there's a building right next to him. I mean, you'd think that he would shoot a web line or something, but no, he just falls down screaming like a normal person. Now, for wall crawling, the functionality is simplistic as it should be. Just touch the wall and Spidey will cling on automatically. The first Spider-Man game that I remember where you had to press a button to stick to the walls was, I think, 2004 Spider-Man 2. But of course that game was a lot more complex with its mechanics. Here, sticking to the walls automatically works just fine. Wall crawling also has 2 animations. The, normal one and the cute one, for more narrow spaces I guess. I also like the web zip feature. It's such a comfortable way to get to the ceiling or to move from one wall to the other depending on your position, and if you have to be more precise with the movement, then you can always use the target mode, or as Spider-Man puts it,
I should probably swing to the next pipes using my L1 targeting mode.
Anyway, despite some minor annoyances with the web swinging and the fact that Spidey only has 1 speed for running and crawling, navigating around these environments is serviceable.
But how?
The core combat system functions adequately as well. You got your typical punch and kick combos. You can do jump attacks, pick up certain objects, throw them, grab enemies, beat the shit out of them, or throw them. And grabbing can be done by pressing the punch and web button at the same time, or the kick and web button. And speaking of web, for a 2000-year game, it's got a decent variety of different web powers that give the combat system more depth. If you only press the web button, which is triangle on the PlayStation, then you can tie your enemies up. Humans go down for good, but the lizardmen and symbiotes will get out eventually. If you press up and triangle, then Spidey shoots out a web ball, which is called the impact web. With it, you can push enemies back, damage them, and apparently even kill them. By pressing left and triangle, you get the web fists, which gives Spidey's punches increased damage. Right and triangle is the web dome. It protects and knocks enemies back. And finally, down and triangle is the web yank, which you can use to pull enemies towards you. It also works to the side if you press the D-pad or push the analog diagonally, but getting this to work was a pain in the ass for me, so I pretty much never tried it. While using all of these different webbing abilities and constantly being in combat, ultimately you are gonna take some hits, and the webbing is limited. In the top left corner we got the health bar, the web capsule counter, and the capsule meter. For health you collect these white spider tokens. For web you need the blue ones, and 10 capsules is max. You can also find yellow tokens if you look carefully, which give the health bar a second layer, and during the symbiote levels you can even find fire webbing upgrades. While it makes taking out symbiotes extremely easy, and thank God, because the symbiotes are the most annoying, toughest regular enemies in the game, the downside to the upgrade is that it depletes way too fast and it's quite scarce. Now, as far as I know, the fire webbing upgrade only appears in the symbiote sections. I guess they didn't want Spider-Man burning people alive.
You idiot!
Overall, from my experience, the combat system works fine. I didn't encounter any major issues like hit detection problems, for example. However, it is possible for the different webbing abilities to backfire because they're tied to the D-pad, which also moves the character. If you time it wrong, then sometimes instead of using the power, you can accidentally turn Spider-Man around, and he takes damage because of it. So maybe it wasn't the best idea to assign these abilities to the movement buttons, but that's about it.
Jeez, one little mistake. We said we're sorry.
I also like how the game lets you know where nearby enemies are if they happen to be off screen with these red arrows, and we even get to see the spider sense in action that lets you know when danger is close, when projectiles are about to hit you, or open vents.
Spider sense tingling. Something's going on here.
Now, one of the most intriguing things about this game, in my opinion, is the camera system. I think anyone playing this game nowadays would notice first that you cannot move the camera with the right analog stick. At times, the camera has been solved brilliantly, like this tunnel crawl section. And when you web zip to the ceiling, the camera immediately rotates itself to give you a better view of your surroundings. So that's the good stuff. But what can cause problems is that the camera has been locked onto Spider-Man. When he turns, the camera turns with him, but it doesn't move instantly. There's a small delay, which can create some weird positioning at times that might make playing a certain section in a level more annoying. For example, the subway ride. You gotta survive until the train gets to the end. It's so easy to fall off during a combo or with a simple jump, because with the automated camera, sometimes it's a little bit hard to understand how much you can actually move. So I just kept spamming the web dome over and over again and collecting capsules. What's kind of interesting about this is that back in 2001, me and my friends never complained about this. We made a lot of jokes about the story and the web swinging and hated the symbiotes, but never did we say anything about the camera. I guess it's because back then, moving the camera with the right analog stick wasn't as common in games as it is nowadays, I think. But over the years, I've gotten so used to this feature that playing without it is just strange. Now, it felt like something is missing, like some control has been taken away from me. But when it comes to the overall performance of the camera, I'd say it's a hit and a miss.
How bad?
There's a lot of enemies in this game, and the AI is not always the sharpest, especially with the humans, I think. Sometimes human enemies wielding guns will run at you and start beating you with the gun instead of, just shooting you. So that's kind of funny. Humans are also the weakest enemies. You can take them out with a few punches or tie them up with the web. The lizard men are stronger. Webbing only stuns them, and aside from normal attacks, they can also grab, bite, and spit some green projectile. I guess it's acid maybe, I don't know. But the symbiotes are the worst. These fuckers hit, spit, and escape. As a kid, I got my ass kicked so many times by these assholes, but the most interesting enemies are definitely the boss fights. They all move differently, attack differently, and have their own strengths and weaknesses. For Scorpion, I usually found it best to just throw stuff at him and try to land a few punches once in a while. As the fight goes on, he's also trying to find and kill Jameson, smashing furniture in the process, so you have to keep Scorpion busy to get him away from that asshole. Rhino is an interesting boss fight. You can defeat him without even attacking him by turning his strength into his weakness. Just let him smash into the generators or the explosive barrels or the wall and you'll be fine. Venom is a bit more devious since he can turn invisible. Just try to listen and catch him as he appears. Land a few quick punches, back off, and don't try to crawl on walls. Also, Venom is the only boss in the game who you gotta fight twice. The second fight is basically the same, the only difference is that Venom keeps hitting the switches that raise the water level, and if it gets too high, then MJ drowns. So while fighting Venom the second time, you also gotta turn off the switches. Mysterio is the only boss fight with phases, and theoretically, he's the best boss experience, but the fight may come off as a bit frustrating because of the controls. Mysterio has these, well, let's call them power points on his body. You have to smash them with the impact web, which is up and triangle, but trying to line up Spider-Man's view with the point by pressing up means that sometimes you might unintentionally fall down because there's not a lot of room to move back and forth, and that can get annoying. But if we forget about that problem for a moment, I'd say it's a good fight. It's definitely the flashiest. We have a giant Mysterio attacking you, lasers, electrified floors, and these spiky spinny things. So much shit to avoid. Unfortunately, Doc Ock is kinda boring. All you gotta do is just jump the force fields, avoid the attacks, hit switches, and beat him up while he's stunned. Rinse and repeat, and definitely use the web fists.
Who dares?
Finally, Carnage. You have to get him inside the sonic bubble to do some real damage. Normal attacks take way too long. You can push him with the impact web, use the web yank, or just punch him inside, and you can keep him in place with the webbing. That's how we used to do it, until a friend of mine discovered by pure accident that you can actually grab Carnage and toss him inside, which is kind of weird now that I think about it. I mean, you can't grab Venom, but you can grab Carnage, who's stronger than Spider-Man and Venom. Huh. But anyway, with that little move, the last boss fight in the game became the easiest. We also have Monster Rock in the final level, but it's not a boss fight, you just have to escape him by using web swings and web zips. I already explained how the swinging can cause issues, but looking past that, this is the most intense level in the game, and it's awesome. Escaping this monstrosity while the base is collapsing, shit blowing up, and this fucker screaming at you is so thrilling. Nobody liked doing this level, but if you beat it, then you were the man. It was intense back then, and it still is.
Listen, it's true.
Now speaking of levels, for such an old game, the variety in locations and objectives is amazing. In one level, you're stopping a bank robbery and saving hostages. Then you get chased by the police. Then you're solving puzzles in the sewers. Later destroying generators, going through an underwater base and fighting against unique bosses who all behave differently.
What is this, the Bad Guy Olympics?
You can also find comic book covers to collect that you can later view in the gallery, hidden passageways, and Easter eggs. Like in the beginning, we can climb the Fantastic Four building.
Man, looks like the Fantastic Four aren't around right now.
During the police chase, you can find the Goblin's lair, but is it Hobgoblins or Green Goblins? I'm not sure.
Gee, I wonder who those pumpkin bombs belong to.
In the Bugle basement, destroy the final generator and just run into the wall.
Who would put a hologram room here?
Then later in the warehouse, before going down to the underwater base, jump over the gap and press the punch button at the gate.
Well, look what I found.
So that was a couple of examples. Now throughout these outdoor rooftop levels, we can see neat different billboards featuring other characters like Wolverine, Carnage, the Lizard, and so on. But one of my favorites is the one with Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 logo. Get close to it and Spider-Man says,
Tony Hawk! Hey, I skated with that guy.
Because Spidey was a playable character in Neversoft's Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, and he came with his own special moves and everything. That is such a fucking cool reference. Another thing about the outdoor levels is the fog. The reason for the fog is that Neversoft lacked the time or tech to render an entire city, so they came up with a way to prevent players from going down to the street level and even tied it with the story so it would make sense. As a kid, I hated the fog. I wanted to go down to the street level so bad. But now, I gotta say, that's a clever move. So in conclusion of this segment, I'd say that fortunately the gameplay has more pros than cons. On my most recent playthrough, I didn't encounter any major game-breaking issues that would have driven me insane. Yes, it's a bit disappointing that you can't swing in true Spider-Man fashion, but then again, I think that would have made going through some of these levels way too easy, and the levels are not that big to begin with. Hell, the game's short enough as it is. I finished it in about 2 hours in one sitting. Then the camera might not always follow your expectations, but at least the game helps you locate enemies more easily with the arrows. And we also have the Spider Sense and the Spidey Compass for guidance.
Why? I don't know yet.
I guess one of the biggest annoyances can be pulling off those 4 web moves, because sometimes you might accidentally end up doing something stupid, like wasting the web or turning around or falling down. But then again, these moments were few and far between because most of the times you're still gonna get it right. I mean, come on, it's just pressing 2 buttons at the same time. It's not fucking rocket science. Except using the web yank to the side. That one gets no redemption from me. Seriously, fuck that move and good luck trying to pull it off at least 5 times in a row without messing up. That's the only one that really sucks. But aside from that, kicking ass and moving around in this game is a lot of fun. We have diverse levels, so the scenery never gets repetitive. Well done boss fights, and I also like it when you damage the boss and the picture in the top right corner makes a different facial expression. Yeah, that's real cute. The gameplay has its weak moments, but it's definitely manageable, and thankfully for the most part, even today, you can still have some fun. So that's about it. And finally, let's check out the presentation.
Oh, for decades I've wanted to shut that mouth of yours.
The graphics are, well, PlayStation 1. When I saw this game the first time on one of those old crappy TVs, I thought it was outstanding. Now, obviously not so much, but the game still looks good for a PS1 title. The environments are well detailed, and I'm surprised that I didn't have any frame rate issues. It was a smooth run from start to finish. Now, I do have mixed feelings about the character models though. Ever since I was a kid, after my initial hype for this game calmed down, I've always been a little bit bothered by certain details, like how Spider-Man's suit is missing that signature black webbing texture. Where's Black Cat's mask? Why do Venom's hands look like that? Or better yet, why do most of the hands on the characters look like that? They really couldn't make normal fingers? Well, maybe. The PC version has a lot of that stuff fixed, but besides that, overall for a PS1 game, they still look fine and they've also been animated quite beautifully, especially Spider-Man.
Thanks, but no thanks.
Just for a quick bonus, if you're playing an indoor level and you let Spider-Man stand in one place for a certain amount of time, then this happens. The voice acting in general is fantastic, and some parts of it still hold up. The characters have a lot of great talent behind them, like Rino Romano as Spider-Man.
Last time I checked, I was Spider-Man.
Romano has been my favorite Spider-Man voice ever since I played this game. I also have to say the same about Venom, who's voiced by Darren Norris.
You're the bad guy this time.
In the game, Norris also does the voice of Scorpion, Punisher, Human Torch, Mysterio, and Captain America, but the best one is definitely Venom. I'm actually a bit disappointed that we never got to hear these two actors playing the same roles in future bigger Spider-Man games, but what are you gonna do? Then we have Jennifer Hale as Black Cat, Ephraim Zimbalist Jr. as Doc Ock, and they both played the same characters in the animated series. We also have D. Bradley Baker as Rhino, Jameson, Daredevil, the Lizard, and Carnage. Now, there's only one voice that I truly don't like in this game, and that's Carnage.
Die! Die! Die!
To me, he sounds like an annoying brat who I just want to smack in the face, so thank God that Carnage doesn't have a lot of dialogue.
Bring it on, Grandpa!
But don't get me wrong, all these voice actors have so much talent, and they've done some amazing work during their careers, and thankfully for the most part, this game is no exception. I definitely recommend to check them all out. You might actually be surprised to see what other characters they've played over the years.
Well, it's not the most romantic proposition I've ever had.
Now let's talk about the music. The soundtrack for this game was composed by Tommy Tallarico. Tommy has produced music for hundreds of video games, gotten numerous awards, nominations, and even holds a couple of Guinness World Records like most video game concerts ever performed. That's another interesting thing about him. He created the Video Games Live, which is a concert where video game music is played by a live orchestra, and I'd love to see that one day, but getting off track here. So anyway, the music in this game, in my opinion, is awesome. Pretty much all the levels have different tracks. I guess the only downside might be that the tracks are short and they're played through loops. But then again, the music usually starts playing when action begins, so for me it never got annoying. As a kid, this was exactly the type of music that I wanted to listen to in games, not that ambient classic shit or whatever. The soundtrack is so catchy, memorable, and for a kid-friendly game like this, it fits perfectly.
Hey, loosen up, kids! I'm on fire!
Now, as I said before, the game is short, but surprisingly, it still packs a decent amount of features. First of all, we can play the story mode with 4 difficulty settings, and just for shits and giggles, if you go back and forth on the kid mode selection, then you can hear this.
Kid mode!
Kid mode!
Kid mode.
There is also a training mode that has some good diversity to offer. You can do speed training, item collection, target practice, survival, select the enemy type you want to practice against, choose between different maps. It's pretty well done, and in the menu under records you can even check out your best scores from the training mode. The gallery is another cool addition. You can check out storyboards, rewatch cutscenes, keep an eye on your comic book collection, view the characters, and each character comes with its own Stan Lee narration.
The Lizard, product of a twisted experiment gone wrong.
You can also see the game covers. Whenever a new chapter begins in the story, then before the cutscene you get to see one of these comic book covers. My favorite is definitely the one with Venom. That looks badass.
He's off his rocker!
Finally, we got the special section. Here we can select levels, view the credits, and switch between different cool looking costumes. Some of these come with special benefits, like the 2099 costume has increased attack damage, the symbiote one has unlimited webbing, the Captain Universe costume has increased attack damage, unlimited webbing, and makes Spider-Man invulnerable. But one of the more intriguing features comes from the unlimited costume. If you press L2 with this suit on, then Spider-Man turns invisible, enabling you to just run past enemies, but it doesn't work against bosses. A couple of costumes have no benefits, and some of them make the game a bit more difficult. For example, the Amazing Bagman. With this costume, you can only hold 2 web cartridges max, so you gotta be smart on how and when you use the web.
Who keeps inviting this guy?
There's also a cheat screen, and let me tell you, this is one of the best cheat menus I've ever seen because of this one simple trick. If you type in a curse word, then this happens. Yeah, Spider-Man doesn't like cursing, and this is something we discovered in 2001 by just randomly messing around. I can never forget the time I spent with my friends testing all the naughty words that we dug out of our 10-year-old rotten brains. Shit, that was a lot of fun. Now when it comes to the cheats themselves, then of course we have the basic stuff like unlimited health, unlock everything, the famous big head mode, but one of the most interesting cheats that I have to talk about is called the What If contest. The What If mode tells the same story like the normal game, but it's got some amusing differences. For example, in the bank level, if you unlock the number 1 door and go inside the room, there's a black platform. Stand on it and just watch.
Thanks, Spider-Man!
Then we got this Matrix ripoff.
The imposter! The imposter!
There's a fish swimming in Mysterio's, fishbowl, and we also get this.
Spider-Man! I'm so happy to see you!
Black Cat, what are you doing? Who's behind this? Why are you dancing?
Your guess is as good as mine. The guys in the ambulance must have drugged me because the next thing I knew I woke up here, and I can't stop dancing! You've gotta get me out of here!
So that's a few examples. Honestly, I wish more games would have a mode like this. For the sake of seeing all the differences, I played through the entire game again, and you know what? It was worth it and a lot of fun.
Michael! Polo! Fish out of water!
So in the end, for a PS1 title, Spider-Man is a good looking and a good sounding game. The character models might not always look the best, but at least they're pretty well animated. The voice acting may sound corny, especially nowadays, but for its time it was off the hook. The levels are well detailed and different, there's a lot of good catchy music that doesn't get annoying because the balance is right, and for a short game, it's got a decent amount of content to mess around with that also helps along with the replay value.
Spider-Wars! Come out and play!
So that was my take on Spider-Man for the PlayStation 1. Of course the game isn't as good as I remembered it, but even after all these years, I still found myself enjoying it for the bigger part, and that's what counts. Yes, the story is stupid, but it's the good kind of stupid. It still has that charm. There's funny lines, funny moments, good character selection, different plot lines, and decent acting. Yes, the gameplay has some flaws, but it's nothing that major that would make you want to break your controller, unlike some other shitfest superhero games I've played. Overall, it's a good-looking, good-sounding, action-packed Spider-Man experience, though it is a good game, mainly for its time, and if you're feeling old school, I absolutely recommend to try this one out if you can. Believe me, it's a blast. So Spider-Man on the PlayStation, not bad. And like always, thanks for watching if you actually made it through, and I'll see you next time.